Hey everybody, and welcome to the channel. HTM here, and in this video we'll be reviewing every class currently available in the Elder Scrolls Online in 2020 and how they rank for solo gameplay. First of all, yes, you can solo much of the content in ESO, even some content meant specifically for groups like 4-player dungeons or world bosses, and this is a great option for when you can't find a group yourself, you might have limited playtime, or you're looking to farm some gear. Soloing is totally viable in those cases, and it can be a lot of fun, but some classes do it better than others. To clarify, I'm not saying any one class in ESO is bad necessarily. Some classes in the game just have better self-healing, defenses, or sustain built into their class skill lines that will make soloing much easier. So if you want to know the best possible classes, both stamina and magicka based for soloing the most difficult content in ESO, stick around because the entire list is starting right now. So starting off in the C tier for solo builds, meaning that these specs are not bad necessarily, they're just average. They may be lacking in some healing or survivability options compared to other classes, but you can improve on this with your own skill as a player or with strong gear set choices. Starting off first with the Stamina Dragonknight. Now this class excels at damage over time and has easy access to the Major Fracture debuff through Noxious Breath, but the class is still somewhat weak when it comes to self-healing and buffs, both of which are extremely important for soloing in ESO. For this reason, I also recommend leveling up the Fighters Guild skill line as soon as possible on your Stam DK to unlock things like the Rune of Preservation skill, for that minor protection buff, as well as some heal over time, as well as Camouflage Hunter for the minor berserk. Both of these are going to be very helpful on a solo Stam DK. You also will most likely want to work on unlocking Vigor from the Alliance War PvP skill line for some additional heal over time. On a positive note though, you do have some very strong ultimates. Those also restore resources through the Battle Roar passive, so make sure you use your ultimates as often as possible. Also falling into the C or average tier is going to be the Stamina Nightblade class. Though Stam Nightblades do have strong single target damage, they lack slightly in the AoE department. And similar to the Stamina Dragonknight, also suffer a bit in the area of self-healing and resource management. However, you can improve your healing and sustain by using the Leeching Strikes ability from the Siphoning skill line. This skill heals you based on your light and heavy attacks while also restoring stamina, so it will be important to light or heavy attack as much as possible on the Stam Nightblade. And speaking of weapon abilities, you may want to pick up Rally for access to a quick burst heal, or of course the PvP skill Vigor to add a strong heal over time to your kit. Moving on to our B tier, these class specs are above average, but still not amazing or necessarily easy to play. However, as always, if you put in the work to learn your class inside and out, these can still perform well for you in places like Veteran Content and Maelstrom Arena. Starting off, we have the Magicka Dragonknight. Magicka DK scores slightly higher than Stamina DK in my opinion due to its greater accessibility to class-based burst heals and heal over time abilities. For example, Burning Embers is a percent-based heal which does more healing based on how much damage you do. This is a very easy healing skill to run since you'll be using it anyway to damage your target. Just make sure to always apply it to at least one enemy and recast it on that enemy again anytime you need to heal up. You also have Coagulating Blood for healing, which scales off of Magicka, and then Draw Essence, which does AoE damage and heals you at the same time, which is great for clearing through trash in a dungeon. For survivability, make sure you take a look at the Ferocious Leap ultimate because it's cheap, it does great damage, and it gives you an absolutely huge damage shield, which is going to be great for solo tanking bosses. Next up, we have Stamina Templar, which has a lot of strong buffs and passives from the Templar class line, as well as some decent stamina morphs of abilities, which make it an above-average solo class. First, Biting Jabs is a strong, spammable ability, though not nearly as strong as the Magicka morph of the same ability, which heals you, though Jabs does give you a passive weapon critical bonus and minor protection for casting, which is nice. Stamina Templars also have Power of the Light, which is a great burst DPS tool, that also debuffs the enemy, providing minor fracture and minor breach. And finally, Stamina Templars have two excellent sustain skills in Repentance and Restoring Focus, meaning you can build for high damage without really worrying about your stamina sustain too much on a Stam Templar build. The main issue for TEMPLAR is, like most stamina classes, they do not have strong or dependable heals built into their class kit. So again, you'll most likely want to run a two-handed weapon with Rally and potentially still pick up Resolving Vigor from the PvP skill line to balance out your survivability. Last but not least, if you can afford the Magicka cost, Ritual of Retribution is actually a nice skill to run on your back bar. This heals you over time as well as does AoE damage. Next up in the B tier for solo PvE, we have the Magicka NIGHTBLADE class. Magblades provide average damage and sustain, but above average healing and utility. The Magicka NIGHTBLADE's main range spammable Swallow Soul can be extremely useful for soloing, as it can do very strong damage and then also heals you back. Magicka NIGHTBLADEs have an equally powerful AoE spammable that also heals them in the Sap Essence ability. Now the base heal on this is pretty low, but it does increase with more enemies hit. Keep in mind that the Magicka NIGHTBLADE does not have a class burst heal for emergencies, so you will need to keep your heal over times running constantly to ensure your survival, which makes them a bit more difficult to play. In terms of damage too, nothing really amazing here. Twisting Path can be used for AoE damage on your back bar, but doesn't provide much else. They also do have a class execute ability, but you need to wait until the enemy is 25% health or less to use it. In terms of utility though, Summon Shade can be a very powerful solo skill in the NIGHTBLADE toolkit, as this debuffs your enemy consistently with minor maim, making them hit you for less damage. Make sure you use this ability, especially against hard-hitting bosses, to reduce their total damage against you. Magicka NIGHTBLADEs also have an easy AoE source of minor vulnerability, thanks to the Lotus Fan skill, which also serves as a great gap closer, letting you cross distances very quickly on the Magicka NIGHTBLADE. Moving on to our A tier for solo builds, all of these are very strong and great choices for soloing most content in the game. If I were to fault them, it would be that they're a bit more complex, which makes them more difficult to play than our S tier builds. But again, once you invest the time in these classes to learn them completely, you will find them very powerful and rewarding to play. First, let's start with the Stamina Warden, one of the strongest stamina specs in the game, due to its overwhelming amount of buffs and debuffs. Seriously, your main issue on the Stamina Warden will probably be deciding which buffs and debuffs to run because there are just so many. Our main spammable Subterranean Assault provides major fracture. We have another spammable in Cutting Dive that sets the enemy off balance. Then you have Growing Swarm, which provides minor vulnerability. And of course, Ice Fortress, which combines our major armor buff with minor protection. But like many stamina focused builds, again, I think the main weakness is a lack of passive healing over time, which we will see resolved eventually in the S tier classes. Don't get me wrong, Stamina Wardens do have great heals like Green Lotus and Soothing Spores, but those heals are not passive, meaning you need to click on them actively. So you need to learn how and when to best use them to stay alive. And if you drop your guard even for a second or you get caught in a stun, those heals will not help you. From Stamina Warden, let's continue on to the Magicka Warden class, which is a very similar setup. We have all the great buffs and debuffs, almost the same from Stamina Warden. I mean, you got major reach on Deep Fissure, you have off balance on Cliff Racer, and minor vulnerability on the Fetcher Infection skill. You of course have the same armor and minor protection on Ice Fortress. I think in terms of raw healing and survival, Magicka Warden might be slightly stronger because they have more heals they can run. For example, both morphs of Living Vines are amazing, and those can keep you alive through almost anything. Then you also have access to greater AoE damage with our Frost magic abilities like Winter's Revenge. Many of these also inflict the shield status effect on enemies, which will make them hit you for less damage, which is again great for solo. So I think it's a very close call between Stamina and Magicka Warden, and it may just come down to which style you like more between the two. Up next, we've got the Stamina Necromancer class. The Necromancers in general, both Stamina and Magicka, benefit from some of the strongest passives in the game. For example, they get tons of sustain and recovery for free thanks to several passives. They get 1250 bonus max health without having to slot any extra abilities. They just get that for free too. And of course, they have massive bonus crit chance damage while slotting those Gravelord abilities. Now, in terms of active abilities, Blast Bones, this thing can hit as hard as an ultimate and it's very cheap to cast, especially with some of our passives as well. Then you've got the Skeletal Archer and Detonating Siphon, both of these providing strong passive damage that you don't really even have to think about. Stamina Necromancers also have great passive defense thanks to the Spirit Guardian skill. Free healing and 10% damage reduction, that's a no-brainer. And on top of that, Stamina Necros have better healing than most stamina builds, thanks to the strength of Mortal Coil. The siphoning ability does great healing over time, and it restores stamina also. And of course, who could forget one of the best ultimates in the game, the Pestilent Colossus Morph, which provides tons of damage and the major vulnerability debuff on all enemies in range. Next, we have Magicka Necromancer, which is very similar to Stamina Necro. You have all the same great passives of the Necromancer class, including bonus sustain, free health, and free crit chance. Stalking Blast Bones, of course, is still a strong damage skill. And in terms of AoE damage over time, you also have the Boneyard ability. This can either debuff your enemy's resistances, or it can give you a free self-synergy, which is awesome. Of course, all the siphoning abilities of the Necromancer class are also available to the Magicka Necro as well, and are quite strong. You've got Hungry Scythe, another Magicka-based class spammable, which heals you while doing damage, and of course heals for more based on how many targets you hit. And then both Necromancer builds have amazing potential ultimate generation, both through passives and through a skill called Necrotic Potency. This gives you healing and ultimate back for however many corpses you have on the ground. So make sure you run this somewhere on your build for easy ulti gen and free heals. Alright, so here we are, finally arriving at the S tier of solo builds. Not only are these class setups extremely strong for solo PvE, but each of them also has so much healing and so many great defensive options that they are essentially an easy win button for most solo encounters. Of course, in more difficult content, let's say VMA or Veteran Dungeons, you still need to learn those basic mechanics of each encounter, but these builds make it so much easier to do so even if you make mistakes. First up, we have the Stamina Sorcerer class, what I consider to be the strongest solo stamina build in the game. While somewhat limited in terms of passive abilities that are useful for them, those they do have are incredibly powerful, including reduced cost of abilities and reduced cost of ultimates, as well as strong passive stamina and health recovery. If you want to talk sustain, Stamina Sorcerers can recycle any unused Magicka back into stamina and health using Dark Deal. Stamsorcs have the highest potential stamina pool in the game thanks to the extra stamina provided by the Bound Armament skill, which also does damage now, by the way. Hurricane, that's an amazing ability which grants you armor, movement speed. It does AoE damage over time, all with just one button click. It's crazy good. And finally, Stamina Sorcerers have access to the best passive heal in the game. That skill is Critical Surge, which gives you great healing back every 1 second as long as you are doing damage, which of course you will be all the time, thanks to skills like Hurricane. So all in all, this combination of damage and passive healing that Stamina Sorcerers can do makes them pretty much unstoppable for solo PvE content in the game. Next up, we have the Magicka Templar class, an absolute powerhouse of self-healing, AoE damage, and defenses. First off, Templar's main spammable ability, Puncturing Sweeps, heals them for a percentage of the damage done. So much like Sorcerers, as long as Magicka Templars are doing damage, they're also being healed at the same time. Then Templars have multiple strong AoE damage effects. I'm talking Blazing Spear, Reflective Light, Solar Barrage. All of these you can combine with sweeps again to do even more AoE damage. And let's talk about Radiant Glory for a minute. An execute ability that starts scaling at 50% enemy health and heals you at the same time. This thing is crazy good. Of course, Templars also have an amazing burst heal in Honor the Dead that also refunds Magicka. And finally, Templar passives are very good as well. We're talking about non-stop minor protection and minor mending, making your build even stronger passively. Templars are pretty much the ultimate healer / damage dealer combo that you can rock for solo PvE in the game. And last but not least, our final build in the S tier is the Magicka Sorcerer. Much like Stamina Sorcerer, Magsorcs have great passives for cost reduction and recoveries. They can also trade stamina back for health and Magicka with Dark Conversion. And talk about strong, Magicka Sorcerers have essentially the strongest damage shield in the game in the Hardened Ward skill, and can gain even more passive Magicka and resistances with Bound Armor. Finally, if you're looking for the ultimate easy mode build, try summoning 3 pets. You've got the Familiar, you've got the Twilight, and then the Atronach Ultimate. All of these will do damage for you while you can focus on other things like keeping yourself alive or just spamming heavy attacks. And then there's the healing. Did I forget the healing? Of course, Magicka Sorcerers still benefit from the same passive healing of Crit Surge, which Stamina Sorcerers can take advantage of as well. This is basically immortality for your build, especially when combined with your damage shields. But then just in case you need it, 2 of our pet morphs can also provide huge burst heals, making pet Sorc builds an extremely strong and easy option for solo PvE. And with all that said, that's going to wrap up our list of the best classes for solo PvE in the Elder Scrolls Online. I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and of course, if you did, don't forget to crush that like button, hit that subscribe button to see more videos just like this, and make sure you turn those notifications on so you don't miss anything. Links to my social media and the new website are going to be down below. Make sure you check those out. As always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great day. Stay safe out there, and I will see you around in the next video.